Good morning, everyone. Nicholas Jacobson here, doing a initial thoughts following the Apalachee High School shooting. So, especially if you're in public schools or schools anywhere in this country, you've already heard about this. This morning, yesterday, there was a shooting that took place at Apalachee High School. There's been a little bit of information that's come out about it so far, but I'm going to approach things a little bit differently than most. And the thing I wanted I have to address, so we can set it aside, is that when you go to the media, and we're going to be picking on ABC News' story here, the one title, officials identify victims in Georgia high school shooting, say AR platform style weapon used. I'm going to pick on them a little bit, but goes for media in general. Whenever we have these school shooting events, the media likes to hyper-focus on a couple of things. Three in particular. They like to focus on the weapon itself, so they say AR platform. And they really, really like to share these stories. When it's not an assault rifle, very little attention gets to these stories. And as a reminder, these are not active shooter events. Yes, this was an active shooting event. These are active threat events. We need to be prepared for acts of violence. And they really like to emphasize this just because it is a politically hot topic. And they love to then turn to the second subject, talk about what are the current candidates of the time talking about. Kamala Harris goes off script and remarks about Georgia school shooting. And if you saw any of those comments, she calls for more gun control. We have to have sensible gun control laws. We also then have the opposite side, being Donald Trump, saying Trump vows to, and this is headlines and Fox News, Trump vows to heal our world after failed Georgia school shooting. They're really trying to draw a comparison between those comments and the shooting. Now, I'm not here to have conversations about politicians or politics, but it has to be addressed that is always one of the key subjects they go towards. What do politicians think? What type of weapon was used? And they really like to focus on these ones. When it's a stabbing, when it's a shotgun, when it's a revolver, they don't talk about those. Bombs and bullets from assault rifles are what are talked about. Now, another note. It says AR platform, AR style, platform style weapon. This literally tells us absolutely nothing about the kind of weapon that was actually used. Yes, it may have been a semi-automatic assault rifle that is very commonplace. It may have been an assault rifle style that was bolt action for all we know. This still doesn't change anything though about what your response should be should you find yourself in one of these events. The other thing they like to focus, so there's two, the weapons, political views, the politicians themselves. The other thing they really like to focus on is the shooter and what can have been done to stop it. So I won't actually say the person's name. You'll never hear me say their name, so you can find his name smeared all over right now. I don't think it's necessary to know their name specifically, because all you need to know is that there's an individual actively engaged in killing and attempting to kill people in a populated area, in this case being a high school. That's what matters most. There's a time and a place for tearing apart the psychology of these individuals. It's also time and place to tear apart the timeline, as they already are doing. In May of 2023, a year ago, the FBI had gotten warnings. Okay, they talk a lot about this, but they don't talk about much. What needs to be talked about more is the school response. Now, we do get a little bit of that. We got to read through the weeds of these news reports in order to get a little bit on what the actual school response was. What was the response of individuals in the school at that time? We got to skip way down. Actually, there's a small part here. It says that the Jackson County Sheriff's Office was alerted schools in the area regarding monitoring of the... Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's the wrong spot. They talk about... It was a little bit earlier. Here it is. Emergency responders were alerted to the shooting due to teachers having a form of identification that had a type of panic button on it. Okay, items, tools. Look, I'd be very curious about this particular identification that had a panic button. I got a feeling it was similar to what we had in the public schools I was working with, where you would have these, they were just random buttons that were connected with the alarm system. And they were panic buttons that would send out an automatic 911 call. We only ever had like 2 in each of our schools. And typically there was one with the main office staff, usually the office manager, and the other one was usually with one of the principals. And if they weren't present, somebody else may have it on them. And there was a couple places throughout the buildings where there would be a physical button on the wall that could be depressed. All that is an alarm system. That's like pulling the fire alarm. They're tools. Fire alarms are tools. I would never get rid of a fire alarm. But that is not a response. Yes, you got to push the button when there's an emergency. Great. You got to pull the fire alarm when there's an emergency. Okay. But what are you doing about that alarm? My curiosities about this are what sort of sounds make that alarm different than others? What sort of information is being shared across the school? And I got a feeling that there is no audible alarm that actually comes out of these buttons being pushed. And there doesn't have to necessarily be, but how I know that is that when you jump down further into the story, students and parents speak out. So this comes from a senior by the name of Sergio, who was in chemistry class when he heard gunshots. But even then, even though that's when he heard it, I assure you, he didn't know what was going on. He didn't realize that those were gunshots. Gunshots don't always sound like gunshots. In fact, they rarely sound like gunshots, except for when you're outside and they're at a distance. And even then, it depends on the direction of the travel of those rounds. Case in point, Donald Trump, when he was fired upon, the attempted assassination that happened, I guess it was now, a couple months ago, month and a half ago, he described what sounded like the loudest mosquito he'd ever heard. And I have a personal story where I was directly targeted with gunfire in Afghanistan. And yeah, it sounded like bees buzzing by my head. I didn't think I was being shot at. Didn't even realize it at that moment. Here's this guy hearing what sounds like gunshots. My teacher goes to open the door to see what's going on. Teacher did not know that there was gunshots taking place. Case in point. Another teacher comes running in and tells her to close the door because there's an active shooter. Okay, so their notification was another teacher running by saying, hey, there's an active shooter. I'm very curious as to what the school's response and expectations were. What was expected of staff? What were they supposed to do? Now, we do know that this particular teacher, Sergio's teacher, he said his teacher locked the door. Good, lock that door. A simply locked door is yet to be breached in an active school shooting event and in an active shooting event in this country to date. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but that's a good first step. Lock the doors. Remember from our earlier classes, shut off the lights, close the blinds, lock the doors. Simply locked doors do save lives. And students ran to the back of the room. Now that I have concerns about, back of the room. Caldera said they heard screams from outside as they huddled up. They're all balled up in the back of that room. God forbid that shooter had made breach into that room. They are sitting ducks. They should be stacked on that wall and be in the ready position, ready to either run if an opportunity comes, continue to hold there and monitor the situation if they don't feel that opportunity is there or if it's safe, or if an individual enters that room, they're in a position where they're ready to fight. So I already know this is a typical lockdown setup of most schools across this country. This is the old mentality. We've got to get away from that, folks. Get away from the old mentality. At some point, Caldera said someone pounded on the classroom door and shouted, "Open up," multiple times. When the knocking stopped, Caldera said he heard more gunshots and screams. That very well could have been the individual with the firearm. That could have been a passerby or looking to find a room to lock down in. We don't know. When it comes to you, if you're in a hallway, so students, staff, you're in a hallway, and a shooting event occurs like this. So who knows? It might have been a passing period. I don't know. There's clearly people in the hallways, though. There was a teacher in the hallway. But there's also class taking place, so I don't know. But we know that there's people out and about. If you find yourself in a hallway and a shooting occurs, you start going, go ahead, try to find a door. You see these doors are now locked. Right answer for the people inside. Don't stop though. If you're in that hallway, don't stop. Don't pound on the door. Don't say, hey, help, help, open the door, open the door. Because if they're doing what they're supposed to, they should not be opening that door for you. They should remain locked down. So what is your option now? Your option is to run. Continue moving, getting away from the sound of violence, get yourself clear of the building, and like we've said before, get yourself off the school site. You're in the run. You don't have the option of locking down. You don't have the option of the hide. All right? You have got to leave the site. Get off school grounds, get that terrain feature away, make your assessments, call 911. You don't know if anyone else is called at this point. There's no way of knowing if anyone else is called 911 at this point. Now, it happened that they did. They were very fortunate. They had 2 school resource officers who were on scene at that time. They both responded very quickly. But again, within even minutes, when seconds count and police are even a minute or 2 away, seconds are a lifetime. And the damage has already been done. There's 4 people killed. If I remember, the reports are still saying 9 people injured. That may be more or less. We'll see as time passes. Here's another report from a student. Kyson said he was in a class when he heard gunshots and heard police scream telling somebody, there's a shooting going on, get down, get back in the classroom. I was scared because I've never been in an actual school shooting, so on and so forth. So here's the point. You've got to have an appropriate response. And for our schools in this country, we've got to change the way schools are responding. I know that some of the students, this is what was said in other reports. Students went and locked down the classrooms, and some students evacuated to the field. And here we go. Here's a photo of them meandering about now on the field, thinking, well, what do we do now? Here they are, all clustered up. Because you know what these kids were trained to do? Lock down and evacuate. And where were they taught to evacuate? To the field. The conversation has never happened of, hey, in a school shooting, you should get off school grounds. We'll find you later, get to safety. That has probably never once happened, at least not formally, maybe in some individual classrooms. Now, I'm sure we'll get more reports coming out of the number of students as time goes by. It'll take weeks, maybe even months, that some of these students did in fact evacuate the school grounds. But look at where this cluster is. A whole bunch of them went to the field. Because what do they do in emergencies? The primary emergency they're trained for, I can guarantee it, is fire. And what do you do in a fire? You go to where you have to line up and get accountability, which happens to be the field. That is not the time or the place when it comes to an active shooting event. You don't evacuate to the field. Now, there might be other things that happen that we don't know about yet. There may have been a fire alarm, that was activated. We have not heard that yet in the reports. But again, these are just my initial thoughts. There's so much more that will come out as time passes. And so stay tuned. These events, we're in the beginning of the school season. We've already started off like this. Jump back to the 2018 school season, 2019 school season. Heck, even going as far back as 2017 school season. We are now in the conversation of shooting. You're going to start hearing this be brought up over and over and over again because the media has their own agenda. Regardless of what personal opinions are, and I don't intend to share my personal opinions on this particular platform about firearms or anything else. At some point I may. But they are, regardless, you have to accept they have an agenda. Their agenda is targeting assault rifle style weapons, good, bad, or ugly, that's an agenda. And to use it in a political perspective by going after politicians and their opinions and perspectives. These things don't matter for you when you have to respond. What matters to you is knowing that there is a threat and you must respond. And remember, they'll talk about these. They're not going to talk about the stabbings. If it became a shotgun, they're not going to talk about shotguns. Those are also threats. Those exist, and you need to be prepared for those. We'll circle back to this particular event. When more information comes out, we will also, as new events unfold, we'll start talking about new events and start piecing them out. I would like to start hearing more about response. I would be curious about this particular panic button. I mean, it's a tool. Tools are useful, but, is just an alarm notification tool. It is not a response.